500 million years ago, the ocean was a quiet place, not because it was empty, but because it was a world of blind, slow-moving experiments. For eons, life had been soft, translucent, and largely peaceful. But then, something shifted in the chemistry of the water and the blueprints of biology. The Cambrian explosion didn't just create life, it created the hunter. Imagine a creature that looks like a nightmare reimagined by a jeweler. This is a Anomalocaris. At 3 feet long, it was the blue whale of its day. It had compound eyes, the first high-definition cameras in history, giving it a terrifying advantage over the sightless trilobites scuttling in the mud below. With 2 spiked, undulating arms near its mouth, it would pluck soft-bodied prey from the sea floor. This was the dawn of the duel, the moment the arms race between predator and prey began. In this era, if you didn't have armor, you were an appetizer. But the reign of the odd shrimp was short-lived. As the millions of years rolled forward into the Ordovician and Silurian periods, the stakes grew higher. Evolution began to solve a mechanical problem. How do you break through a shell? The answer was the invention of the jaw. Early fish, like the placoderms, didn't have teeth in the way we think of them. They had massive, razor-sharp bony plates that acted like self-sharpening shears. Enter Dunkleosteus. If Anomalocaris was a nimble scout, Dunkleosteus was a main battle tank. Living roughly 360 million years ago, this Devonian monster grew up to 20 feet long. Its head and thorax were encased in thick, bony armor. It didn't need to chase you for long. It used a high-speed suction mechanism to pull prey into its mouth in a fraction of a second, followed by a bite force that could snap a modern shark in half. The duel was no longer just about who could see, it was about who could crush. We see the evidence of this struggle in the fossil record, trilobites with healed bite marks and small fish developing increasingly complex spines and shields. This was the era of exoskeleton versus bite force. As the seas became crowded with armored killers, the duel moved toward the shore. The first predators to crawl out of the water weren't giants, but they brought with them the hardware of the abyss. They were pioneers in a new, oxygen-rich frontier, where the rules of gravity changed, but the rules of the hunt remained the same. In this chapter, we witness the birth of aggression. We see how the basic tools of the predator, vision, speed, and the jaw, were forged in the primordial soup, setting the stage for the monsters of the land. The duel had begun, and for the next 500 million years, no creature on Earth would ever be truly safe again. While the oceans were still churning with armored fish, the land was a silent green frontier. But the silence didn't last. By the Permian period, roughly 270 million years ago, the duel had officially moved onto solid ground. This wasn't the age of dinosaurs yet. That was still millions of years in the future. This was the age of the therapsids, the beast-faced ancestors of mammals, and they were the first to turn the terrestrial landscape into a killing field. The first true lords of the land were the Dinocephalians, a name that literally translates to terrible heads. These weren't the nimble, lizard-like creatures you might expect. They were massive, barrel-chested tanks. Some, like Ankylosaurus, weighed nearly 2 tons. Their skulls were thickened, sometimes up to 6 inches of solid bone, suggesting they didn't just bite, they head-butted their rivals and prey like prehistoric battering rams. They were the first apex predators to dominate a global ecosystem, prowling the floodplains of what is now South Africa and Russia. But as the Permian progressed, a new kind of assassin emerged, one that prioritized speed and precision over raw, clunky mass. These were the Gorgonopsids. If you were to see one today, you might mistake it for a cross between a wolf and a lizard, but with a terrifying twist: saber-teeth. Long before the Smilodon of the Ice Age, the Gorgonopsids perfected the punch-pull-kill. Their upper canines were massive blades designed to slide between the thick, leathery hide of the herbivorous Paleosaurs. The Gorgonopsids represented a massive leap in predatory engineering. Their legs were tucked further under their bodies than their sprawling ancestors, allowing them to gallop. They had developed a differentiated bite, incisors for nipping, canines for killing, and molars for processing. They were the first animals to truly stalk the earth. They didn't just wait for prey to swim by, they hunted it across miles of open terrain. However, the land grab was more than just teeth. It was about the climate. The Permian world was a harsh, drying place, dominated by the supercontinent Pangaea. To survive as a predator here, you needed more than just a big bite. You needed to be able to travel vast distances between waterholes. The Gorgonopsids were the masters of this arid world, sitting at the very top of a complex food web. But their reign was headed for a brick wall. The Great Dying, the Permian Triassic extinction, was about to turn the atmosphere into a toxic trap. In this chapter, we see the peak of the first great mammalian ancestor empire. We witness the perfection of the saber-toothed blueprint and the rise of the terrible heads. It was a world that belonged to the Therapsids, a world where the ancestors of dogs and humans were the undisputed kings of the hunt, until the earth cracked open and the stage was cleared for the arrival of the dinosaurs. The Great Dying had wiped the slate clean. The terrible heads and the saber-toothed Gorgonopsians were gone, buried in the ash of the Permian extinction. Out of the ruins crawled a new kind of survivor, the Archosaurs. These were the ancestors of crocodiles and dinosaurs, and they were about to build a dynasty that would last for 165 million years. This was the era of the theropods, the beast-footed killers who turned bipedalism into a lethal art form. In the early days of the Triassic and Jurassic, predators like Coelophysis and Dilophosaurus were built for speed. They were lean, light-boned, and looked like feathered greyhounds with serrated teeth. But as the world moved into the Middle Jurassic and Cretaceous, a size war began. Prey was getting bigger. The long-necked sauropods were reaching the size of buildings, and the predators had to keep pace. The dynasty split into two terrifying philosophies of the kill. First, there were the slicers, like Allosaurus and Gigantanosaurus. These animals didn't try to crush bone. Instead, they had hatchet-like skulls and blade-like teeth. An Allosaurus would use its upper jaw like a literal axe, swinging it down into the soft flesh of a giant herbivore, causing massive blood loss. It was a hit-and-run style of hunting, perfect for taking down prey 10 times its own size. But then, at the very end of the Cretaceous, nature perfected a different weapon, the Tyrannosaurs. If Allosaurus was a rapier, Tyrannosaurus rex was a sledgehammer. The anatomy of a T-Rex is a masterclass in biomechanical destruction. Its skull was reinforced to withstand massive pressure, and its teeth weren't blades, they were thick, serrated bananas designed to puncture armor and shatter solid bone. A T-Rex didn't just bite you, it erased you. With a bite force estimated at 12,000 pounds per square inch, it could literally explode the bones of a triceratops. But the Tyrant King wasn't just a brute. Recent studies of its brain case show massive olfactory bulbs for tracking scent across miles and binocular vision that rivaled a modern hawk. It was a genius-level assassin wrapped in 7 tons of muscle. While the giants ruled the open plains, a smaller, more cunning branch of the dynasty was evolving in the shadows, the dromaeosaurs, or raptors. These predators introduced a third philosophy, the claw. Animals like Deinonychus and Utah raptor used a sickle-shaped toe claw to latch on to prey, using their body weight to pin the victim down while they used their jaws to finish the job. They were the special forces of the Cretaceous. The Tyrant dynasty was the pinnacle of terrestrial predation. They refined vision, intelligence, and raw power to a point that has never been matched on land since. They weren't just monsters, they were the result of 100 million years of predatory refinement. In this chapter, we see how the dinosaurian elite conquered every corner of the globe, from the polar forests to the tropical swamplands, reigning supreme until a fire from the sky ended the greatest empire the world had ever seen.
If you think the land was dangerous, you haven't seen the water. On land, gravity limits how big a predator can get. But in the ocean, the buoyancy of the water removes those limits, allowing for the evolution of monsters that make a T-Rex look like a scavenger. This is the story of the nightmare seas, where the arms race didn't just produce bigger teeth, it produced entire biological weapon systems. The nightmare began long before the dinosaurs with the armored placoderms we met previously. But after the great extinctions, a new group of hunters took over, the marine reptiles. During the Jurassic and Cretaceous, the oceans were ruled by the pliosaurs. Imagine a creature with a 10-foot-long skull, a neck built like a bridge girder, and 4 massive flippers that could propel a 45-ton body through the water like an underwater jet. The king of this era was Pliosaurus funki, often called Predator X. Its bite force was estimated at 33,000 pounds per square inch, 4 times stronger than a Tyrannosaurus. It didn't just eat fish, it ate other marine reptiles. It was the ultimate crusher of the Mesozoic abyss. But even the pliosaurs were eventually replaced by the mosasaurs, serpentine, lizard-like hunters with double-hinged jaws and an extra row of teeth in the roof of their mouths to ensure that once they grabbed a prey item, there was no escape. However, as the age of reptiles faded, a much older lineage was waiting in the shadows to reclaim the throne: the sharks. For 400 million years, sharks had been the silent partners of the ocean. But in the Miocene, roughly 20 million years ago, they produced the most famous predator in history, Otodus megalodon. Megalodon wasn't just a big great white, it was a specialized whale killer. Growing up to 50 or 60 feet long, its teeth were the size of a human hand, designed not just to slice flesh, but to crunch through the massive rib cages of prehistoric whales. Unlike the great white, which attacks from below and retreats, evidence suggests Megalodon was a tactical striker,
aiming for the flippers and tails of whales to immobilize them before delivering the final crushing blow to the chest. But Megalodon wasn't alone. It shared the seas with a rival just as terrifying, Leviathan, a raptorial sperm whale with teeth 14 inches long. These titans represented the absolute peak of marine predation, a clash of the super shark versus the killer whale on steroids. In this chapter, we explore why these giants eventually vanished. It wasn't because they were beaten in a fight. It was because the world changed. As the earth cooled and the currents shifted, the great nurseries of the whales moved to colder waters where the cold-blooded megalodon couldn't follow. The nightmare seas remind us that even the most powerful bite force in history is no match for a changing climate. The ocean is the ultimate graveyard of giants, a place where the perfect hunter is only as strong as the ecosystem that feeds it.
The world that emerged from the fires of the Cretaceous was empty, quiet, and ripe for a new kind of killer. The dinosaurs were gone, leaving a vacuum that the mammals, once scurrying nocturnal insect eaters, were eager to fill. But the path to the top of the food chain wasn't a straight line. Before the lions and wolves we know today, the earth was haunted by the Cenozoic assassins, a bizarre collection of mammalian experiments that combined raw power with a new, terrifying tool, high-level intelligence. The first true lords of the post-dinosaur era weren't cats or dogs. They were the entelodonts, famously known as hell pigs. Imagine a creature the size of a bison with the face of a warthog, but with bone-crushing jaws and massive protruding cheekbones. They were the ultimate opportunists of the Oligocene. Their teeth show evidence of crushing bone and tearing flesh, and their skulls often bear the scars of brutal fights with their own kind. They were the tank of the Cenozoic, armored by sheer muscle and a temperament that made them the most feared animals on the plains. But as the forests thinned and the great grasslands of the Miocene began to spread, the hunt changed. You couldn't just be a tank anymore. You had to be a stalker. This shift gave rise to the hynodonts and eventually to the nimrovids, or false saber-tooths. These predators began to refine the social hunt. While a T-Rex relied on brute force, these mammalian assassins began to use pack tactics, coordination, and a highly developed sense of hearing and sight. The pinnacle of this mammalian arms race was the Machairodontine, the true saber-toothed cats. The most famous, Smilodon fatalis, was a marvel of biological engineering. Contrary to popular belief, Smilodon didn't have a stronger bite than a modern lion. In fact, its bite was weaker. Its secret was its shear bite. It would use its immensely powerful forelimbs to pin a giant bison or a young mammoth to the ground, then use its 7-inch serrated canines to slice through the soft throat of its prey. It was a surgical strike, designed to end the struggle in seconds. But the Cenozoic also produced killers that hunted from above and from the shadows of the Ice Age. The short-faced bear, Arctodocimus, stood 12 feet tall on its hind legs and could outrun a horse, making it the largest terrestrial mammalian carnivore to ever walk the earth. Meanwhile, the dire wolf patrolled the edges of the glaciers, using endurance and numbers to wear down the massive megafauna of the Pleistocene. In this final chapter, we see the end of the 500-year duel. These assassins didn't fall to a bigger predator. They fell to a changing world. As the Ice Age ended and the giant prey, the mammoths, the ground sloths, the ancient bison vanished, the specialized killers like the Smilodon had nothing left to hunt. The assassins were victims of their own perfection. They were designed for a world of giants, and when the giants died, the age of the prehistoric predator finally came to a close, leaving only the smaller, more adaptable hunters we see today. The story of prehistoric predators is a story of adaptation. From the first jaw in the Cambrian Sea to the last saber-toothed strike in the snow, life has spent 500 million years perfecting the art of the kill. But as history shows us, in the end, the most dangerous thing a predator can be is too specialized for a world that never stops changing.